What's up, Liquid fans? Eric here with LiquidFanTV, bringing you the pre-show for the VCT Masters Reykjavik. And off the back of our EMEA Finals win against Fnatic, we're looking like one of the top contenders to win the entire tournament. So let's see what that might look like. To kick things off, I'd like to take a look at the players since the squad and the scene is still relatively new. Starting with Scream, if you've heard of this guy, you won't be surprised by anything here. He's flaunting a KDA of 1.45, which is the second highest of all playoff participants. And that high KDA is clearly reflected in his average damage per round and his average combat score. So you can see he's well above the other EMEA participants in his stats. He's having immense impact round after round for us. And of course, his headshot percentage is exceptionally high, 35% against the average of 25%. So it's easy to see why there's so much hype around Scream. He's consistently performing at a level that is unimaginable for most players. But really, he's more than just the headshot machine for the squad. We can put him on that Phoenix, on that battle stage, and just have a strong, reliable player that we can count on for the multi-kills, for a lot of damage if he's not getting the kills. And I think overall he's just turned in a fantastic player for our squad. Following Scream, we've got Link, a name you might hear a little bit less, but he's certainly an important piece in the squad. Link might not look like statistically the flashiest player, especially once we just went over Scream, but he's playing a majority of his matches on the Brimstone or the Omen, and I think a lot of viewers might not fully understand the nuance in agents like these, but things like where to smoke, when to smoke, what specific areas you might want to deny are all very important to a team's game plan. You need to be able to take in a lot of information about player positioning and then interpret that into your utility usage to enable your teammates, specifically your duelists, so they can really control as much space as possible, which is very important in a tactical shooter like Valorant. He's also fulfilling his role within the team brilliantly, and he's had plenty of his own highlights. But specifically, I'm really interested to see if we see Link playing the Astra, an agent we've seen other teams drawn to. We've seen Fnatic able to utilize the Astra utility very well, and I think that's something we could see Link and Sliggy spending time to fully implement by the time the VCT Masters rolls around. Now, alongside Link is Soulcast, and he's in a very similar realm in terms of utility usage and what that means for the team. Soulcast played Skye in 8 matches, he played Viper only once, and Sova 3 times, but you can really tell when he's on that Skye, he seems to be in his realm. He's always performing an absolute masterclass. The information he's able to get for the team with his utility usage and the openings he can create are incredibly important for our attacking and our defending side. And I think after he had to adjust his play when we added Yampy, he did so in a really fluid manner. He's not necessarily that duelist that he once was, but he's still a really mechanically talented player. He's, making these fake flashes, getting multi-kills, holding angles, getting multi-kills. So even though he's not necessarily where he used to be on the squad, he seemed to really maintain his level of play without any issues, and I think that's a great sign for him. There was a point where he was potentially brought into question, and I think he was able to turn that around and really prove that he deserves to be a staple member of Team Liquid. Finally, we've got Yampy, and while it might look like his stats are a little more average, I think there is a lot more to how he plays than just the numbers. The biggest highlight would be his opening duel win rate. He's won 62% of his opening duels, and that stat line evolves into Team Liquid winning roughly 80% of the rounds when he is successful getting that opening kill. So as a viewer, if you're looking for a metric on how Team Liquid is performing, Yampy getting that opening kill is a great initial marker for us. Outside of that, it seems like he also brings some great leadership and confidence to the squad. Team Liquid doesn't actually really have a traditional single in-game leader like some other teams do, but I think Yampy really seems to fill that role, at least outside of the gameplay. He's bringing in high energy, he's reassuring players when he loses rounds, he's setting up, our cheers, our claps at the beginning of the game. So while he maintains that star power of being the opper and the entry fragger for us, he really seems to be much more than just that. Now, moving on to Cryptix, you might have noticed he wasn't in the initial 4 lineup here, but I actually wanted to specifically highlight him a little more than the others because I think when we talk about top European players, he's a little unfairly left out of the discussion. He's certainly flown under the radar, but when you really dive into his stats and the importance of what he's doing in the team, I think it becomes very obvious how important of a player he is for Liquid. Right off the bat, you can see he's well above the EMEA average on all of his stats here. 1.40 KDA, the 3rd highest overall among EMEA participants. His ADR and ACS numbers are reflected in that as well. His headshot percentage given is a little bit lower than what you'd expect, but it clearly doesn't impact his ability to frag and win important rounds. He won 34% of the clutches that he was in against the average of only 15% among playoff participants, and he's active across all facets of play. He's planting 29 spikes. That's the 2nd highest on Team Liquid. Only Link had more spike plants than that, which isn't necessarily the flashiest or the most significant stat, but then you look over at multi-kills, and he's averaging multi-kills in 23% of the rounds he plays. Cryptic's got multi-kills in 52 out of the 224 rounds that Team Liquid played. That is the third highest overall in the EMEA playoffs, behind only Scream and Durka, two players that were considered for MVP of the entire tournament. And I think this really paints a picture for how important Cryptic's is to Team Liquid. I think the narrative revolves around Scream and Yampy a whole lot, and rightly so. Scream is a consistent player, second to no one. He was Week 1 MVP and Tournament MVP for the EMEA Finals. Yampy, we discussed how impactful his opening kills are, but Cryptic's has quietly been making his case for why he could be an MVP in his own right, and I think he'll certainly be a highlight player for viewers to watch out for. So now that we're familiar with the players, what does the major itself look like? I think it's a little bit difficult to say. There's a whole lot of regions coming in here with a whole lot of different ideas. It's the first international tournament, but there are a few teams that I do want to specifically highlight because I think they could be interesting matchups against Team Liquid, or just in general, they could kind of challenge us the most for first place in this tournament. On our side of the bracket, we have the Korean VCT champions, New Turn Gaming. We could meet them relatively early on. They seem to play somewhat a unique style compared to other regions. Specifically, they tend to ignore the Viper, one of the stronger agents from what we've seen. And they also seem to lean a little bit more on utility usage instead of actively looking for that opening duel. But that being said, I did see them actually playing a little bit aggressive in quite a few of their rounds, especially in the finals against Damwon Korea. And they did seem like they weren't, just solely relying on that utility. But for the most part, it does seem they're a little less active, especially than the European teams. They play a little bit more passively on the sites. And so it'll be interesting to see how that style matches up against someone like Yampy, who at times will aggressively seek out that opening kill. On the opposite side of the bracket, we've got Crew Esports, and they're coming into Reykjavik on top of the Latin America region. One that I would say probably a lot of viewers and analysts might easily discount, but they were exceptionally dominant in that region with some outrageous KDAs, 1.59 on Klaus, 1.57 on Nags, and that firepower that they displayed is something that can easily draw parallels to the skill of Scream and Yampy. Crew won their finals in a reasonably convincing 3-1. They only lost 2 maps across the entirety of the playoffs, so even if you believe Latin America is a weaker region when compared against EU or NA, when a team is this dominant, it's clear that they have the skill to hang against the other major regions and top teams. And lastly, of course, we've got Sentinels, the champions of the NA region, and entering Iceland, I think most analysts would be calling NA and EU the stronger regions. It's entirely possible that we'll probably end up meeting them in the upper bracket finals. They recently had a bit of a shakeup. They brought in TenZ, and they've looked really strong with him as a stand-in. They beat version 1, the NA second seed, 3-0 in the grand finals in what seemed to be a pretty dominant series. I think one of the more interesting marks here, if we do meet them, is how Yampy and TenZ are performing. The games where Sentinels seems to be the most dominant are games where TenZ is winning that opening duel, very similar to Yampy. So our matchup could very much be dependent on how Yampy and TenZ are playing. So I'll leave this with a few final notes about Liquid. I want to keep this relatively short. We've got, in my opinion, one of the best coaches in the scene, and Sliggy seems incredibly motivated to win with this team. He's really sharing that motivation with the team. We saw in the qualifier vlog that Team Liquid released. You'll see it if you ever head into his stream. So he's bringing more than just that analyst role. He's also making sure the team stays on track with their goals and really stays excited and passionate to win this tournament. And I think coaching staff for any team is always really important in how successful that team can be. Sometimes in esports, it's a little bit tough to see the impact they have, but I think the respect that Sliggy has around the scene and his motivation is really great just to see as a Team Liquid fan, and I think it really bodes well for the team going into the tournament that we have such a great coach. Overall, I do feel like VCT Masters Reykjavik is going to be an incredibly exciting tournament for Team Liquid fans, and I'm really looking forward to seeing us play and to see a Team Liquid jersey on the international stage again.